Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the silver streak ball python. The silver streak is actually a completely silver ball python. Almost looks like it's made of metal. And the genes that make up the silver streak are the super pastel and the black pastel. It's kind of interesting. You mix a dark morph like the black pastel with a really bright yellow snake like the super pastel, and you end up with a silver colored looking snake. It's kind of an interesting anomaly. And what's even more cool about the silver streak is when you start mixing other genes into the silver streak, you can make some really amazing combinations. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over the internet and I want to show you the potential of the silver streak ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with the black pastel. The black pastel is one component of the silver streak, and the black pastel is actually a dark morph, one of the darkest morphs in fact. If you actually take two black pastels and breed them together, you end up with a super black pastel, which is a completely patternless jet black snake. It's probably the blackest ball python that you can actually make. And another component of the silver streak is the super pastel. Take a look at this snake. It's interesting. You take a dark morph and you breed it to the super pastel to form a really silver ball python. And the super pastel actually has two copies of the pastel, so it's a little bit more difficult to hit because you actually have to have three genes in the silver streak. And the super pastel is, as a matter of fact, if you just had one copy of the pastel, a lot of times it's kind of yellow, and you actually have two copies of the gene. It really intensifies the yellow color of the snake, and a lot of times it really reduces the pattern, and a lot of times it jumbles it up. And in the super pastel, I'd say in most cases you actually have these highlights right down the spine of the snake, and I'd say in most cases you also have a faded out head in the super pastel. So if you actually take the super pastel and breed it into a black pastel, here's what you get. You get a silver streak, and take a look at this thing. This is pretty amazing, and it almost doesn't even look real. Looks like it's made out of metal or something like that. As a matter of fact, I've seen people handle these on YouTube videos, and it looks like you have like something that was cast out of metal instead of a real ball python. It looks pretty wild. And if you actually take a closer look at the snake, a lot of times in some of these silver streaks, you actually get some fading in the snake, more or less fading, and it's almost like kind of a paradox that is associated with the silver streak. We actually see more or less fading. Sometimes you don't see any fading at all through the body of the snake. I just thought it was like kind of an interesting anomaly. So from here I want to show you some of the genes that work really well when mixed into the silver streak, and the one that I really like probably the best is the pinstripe. This is what a pinstripe looks like, and the pinstripe is probably the brightest gold standalone morph that you can actually get. And the more I'm actually working with the pinstripe in a lot of these combos, the pinstripe really can make some really stunning combos if you mix it with almost anything. It's a really versatile gene. It's really inexpensive too. And here's what happens if you work pinstripe into the silver streak, and take a look at this snake. This is pretty incredible. You end up with a completely, almost a patternless snake. It almost seems like it's granulated, maybe has a little bit of kind of a break in the pattern about, you know, 2/3 down the snake. And look at the head on this thing. You get a really crazy head stamp that is gray, kind of an unexpected effect when you actually mix the pinstripe into the silver streak. It's a little bit difficult to hit because if you actually look at the genes, you actually have the black pastel, two copies of the pastel, which is the super pastel, and the pinstripe. So essentially you have four genes in the snake. A little bit more difficult to hit than some combos. So here is the spider ball python. The spider is probably one of the visually most stunning snakes that you can get. It almost looks like it has multiple genes, but it's just one gene, the spider. It's actually a dominant mutation. So if you breed the spider to something else, half the offspring come out as spider. And the spider can be pretty variable. If you actually look at this one, it has this white coming up about halfway up the body. Sometimes the white is almost barely noticeable on the bottom. Sometimes the white on the spider comes really high up the side. and this is probably one of the best examples of the spider that I've seen. Here's what happens if you take spider and work it into the silver streak. You get a spider silver streak. And take a look at this. It's kind of interesting how all the genes work together. It kind of shatters up all the spider pattern. You almost can't even see that the spider is in there, and it kind of keeps some of the silver up along the head part of the snake and kind of fades out towards the end of the snake. Kind of amazing. And I actually pulled up another snake, and that is the silver streak with both the spider and the pinstripe. I thought this was pretty amazing. Take a look at this one. This is actually the silver streak spinner. Really amazing snake. It's amazing how the pinstripe kind of calms down the spider. You get all these tiny little streaks right down from kind of the combination between the pinstripe and the spider in the mix. If you actually look at the genes on this one, it's pretty complicated because you actually have, you know, essentially you have 5 genes in this snake. So some of these, unless you're actually, you know, working at the beginning with like a couple super pastels, you know, if you actually breed 2 super pastels together, everything comes out super pastel. Instead of if you just had one copy of the gene, I think it'd be a little bit more difficult to actually hit some of these combos. So here is the lesser. The lesser is actually in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. So if you actually breed a lesser to a lesser, or to like a Russo or a Mojave or a bamboo, anything in the blue-eyed leucistic, you end up with an all-white snake with blue eyes. So if you're actually shooting for some of these combos, you kind of want to avoid another gene in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, because you'll end up with an all-white snake, which pretty much masks all the other genes in the snake. But if you actually mix the lesser in with the silver streak, take a look at this crazy snake. I think this is probably one of my favorite silver streak combos. It almost looks like a lesser that is almost like a really faint metallic color, almost like a kind of like a peachy yellow color. Really amazing. And I like how it really kind of breaks into certain sections. The top part has pattern, and then about halfway down the snake it turns from yellow into white. Makes for a really amazing combo. And take a look at the head on this. Look at the pattern right behind the eye. That is really unique. I don't think I've ever seen any pattern behind the eye, anything quite like the lesser silver streak. So here is the Mojave. The Mojave is also in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. As a matter of fact, they say if you want the best blue-eyed leucistic, the brightest white snake that is really super pure white, you can actually breed a Mojave with the lesser. You get the Mojave lesser, which is pretty much considered to be the ultimate blue-eyed leucistic. And here's what happens if you take the Mojave and you mix it in with the silver streak. Take a look at this. This is kind of interesting because it's you know, similar to the lesser in appearance, but when it reacts with the silver streak, it's completely different. Almost keeps all of the silver color of the silver streak. And essentially what it does, I was actually looking at this and then the original silver streak, and what it's really doing with the Mojave is it's changing kind of the scrambled up pattern on the sides into these kind of floating donut holes by mixing Mojave in with the silver streak. Makes for a really amazing snake. So here is the banana ball python, one of my favorites, the banana, and because the banana's kind of tricky because if you actually start with a young banana, it looks really stunning, really impressive with all these oranges and purples, and it really transforms as it ages. It loses all the orange and purple and turns into a two-tone snake with a lot of freckles. You can kind of see some of the freckles coming in on the snake, and when it ages and matures, it gets a lot more freckles. It's like it's kind of amazing how the bananas change as they age. If you actually work banana into the silver streak, take a look at this. You actually get, it's kind of amazing that the banana is really dominating this combination. And usually with the banana is really visually dominant, but it's kind of, you know, some of these are really unpredictable as to what's really going to dominate until you actually mix all the genes together, whether it's, you know, the silver streak, kind of the pattern and the color, or the banana. In this case, the banana definitely wins out. And I really like how it really keeps the banana color and really scrambles up the pattern. As a matter of fact, if you mix banana with a lot of combos, in certain combos, it actually takes away all the freckles as the banana matures. And if you look really close on this one, it almost looks like there's not even one little black speck on the snake. So I'm thinking maybe in this case that the silver streak will actually take away all the freckles as this snake matures. So here's another really visually dominant morph, the albino. Usually mixed with albino with anything and you get an albino looking snake. And I'd say when it comes to albino, most people go for the albino pines with the splotches of white, you know, from the albino color to the white color on the snake. Because a lot of times there's not really a lot of things you can really do with the albino. There's just a few things. If you actually take the albino, which is also a recessive gene, and actually need 2 copies of the albino gene, so it's even more difficult to hit. You add the albino to the silver streak and take a look at this. You end up with an albino. The albino definitely wins, and you can kind of predict this because if you look back at the banana, which is a visually dominant, I'd say the albino is even more visually dominant than the banana when you're actually mixing it into some combos. But you can definitely see in this case it really kind of lightens the background. It really scrambles up the albino pattern, makes for a really interesting combo. As a matter of fact, if you look at the genes on this one, this is actually 2 copies of the albino, 2 copies of the pastel, and the black pastel. So essentially, you would need 5 genes to actually make this combination. Kind of tough to actually hit. So here is the fire. The fire is kind of an interesting snake. If you breed 2 fires together, you get an all-white snake with black eyes. And usually when you mix fire in with other combos, it is a lightening gene. So it will really lighten the background of pretty much any combo that you mix it with. It works really well if you mix it in with like pastel and orange dream. Really makes for some really bright and clean snakes. Here's what happens if you take the fire and you work it into the silver streak. Take a look at this. You essentially get a silver streak that is slightly faded out. You can definitely tell the fire definitely has kind of the normal effect of the fire when working it into this combo, and it kind of really scrambles up the pattern too, which is kind of unique when you mix all these genes together. And I really like the stripe that comes right down the back of the head and just kind of stops, and then the whole the rest of the body is really jumbled up as far as the pattern. It looks pretty awesome. So here is the clown. This is actually another recessive mutation. So if you actually work this into the silver streak, you are looking at another 5 gene combo, which is pretty tough to hit. But if you actually work the clown into the silver streak, take a look at this. This is pretty crazy. This is actually almost probably as silver as you can get in a clown combo. And when it comes to clowns, I'd say the clown is the king of combos as far as recessive mutations. Works really well with a lot of combos and makes for a really amazing combo when you actually work with this. As a matter of fact, the black pastel, I'm thinking a lot of the streaking on the sides of a lot of these snakes are probably from the black pastel. You usually get a lot of streaking with like black pastel or sometimes with the cinnamon, and it's kind of interesting with the cinnamon and black pastel. You can actually breed those 2 together and you end up with an 8-ball. It's actually allelic. The black pastel is allelic with cinnamon. So here is one of the last ones I actually wanted to show you. This is actually the fire spider yellow belly. So this actually just looks exactly like a spider, and the fire kind of lightens the background a little bit. And a lot of times if you mix yellow belly in with certain combos, you almost can't even see the yellow belly in some cases. Some cases it has a really dramatic effect. And this is actually, I found a snake like this with the silver streak in it. So I wanted to kind of strip out the silver streak and show you the snake before we actually added it. So if you actually combine this with the silver streak, take a look at this. This is this is a really crazy combo. It's completely unexpected. This is actually, if you actually look at the genes of this is actually the black pastel, the fire, the super pastel, the yellow belly, and the spider. Essentially 6 genes. And the first thing I thought when I looked at this snake is I thought this looked almost exactly like a vanilla scream. If you've actually seen a vanilla scream before. As a matter of fact, I pulled up a vanilla scream. I kind of wanted to show you the difference between this and a vanilla scream. Look at this. The vanilla scream is actually the vanilla, the fire, and the pastel looks almost exactly like this crazy snake over here. It's kind of interesting. I've had a lot of people actually show me some snakes, and it gets really confusing trying to guess what genes are actually in the mix, especially if you get into like a 6-gene combo like this. A lot of times some of these snakes with multi-genes can actually look like something but have completely different genes in the mix. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And Kelly Williams asks, How come Bobby is so puppy dog tame? And that is a very good question. The snake around my neck, this is Bobby, my bamboo ball python, and he is really super tame. He is really an amazing ball python. As a matter of fact, I started, when I started shooting these videos, I was actually kind of switching out all the ball pythons around my neck. I have an albino around my neck one day, then I have Bobby around my neck the other day. It seems like the more I kind of cycled through all my ball pythons, they were always kind of skittish and jumpy, and a lot of them would like choke me out quite a bit. And when I decided pretty much just to stick with one ball python, it was pretty much an experiment. And the reason I kind of went with the bamboo with Bobby here is because I've never really seen anybody have a really big bamboo ball python before. So he's really kind of a unique example of the Morph being such a big bamboo. And it's kind of interesting. I was actually working with him day after day, and he just got tamer and tamer. And he gets to the point where I could pretty much do anything with Bobby. He is a really amazing ball python, super puppy dog tame. He is pretty amazing. And it seemed like it took me maybe about 3 months for him to stop choking me out. A lot of times, I'd say for the first 3 months, every now and then he'd kind of really constrict around my neck. He wouldn't like put me in danger or anything like that, but I could definitely tell he was stressed. And then probably after about 3 or 4 months, he just completely relaxed and he decided he was going to trust me 100%. And I think it's just working with them day after day. And I'd say, here in front of the camera, I probably work with them maybe about half an hour a day. So it's not a whole lot of time, but it's the consistent daily working with the snake around my neck, just kind of handling him. And I think he really likes getting out of the tub and kind of looking around the room and just kind of hanging out in front of the camera. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.